Hi, this is Tom for PokerVIP.com, and welcome to part two of my series on pot limit Omaha here at Betfair. So part one seemed to go pretty well. I was happy with the spots we found. I think the last one, the last hand we played in that session, with the Ace King was probably the most interesting hand. I kind of illustrated that sometimes playing a passive line with a reasonably strong hand can be profitable. Obviously, in that instance, our opponent did happen to have the same hand as us, but we can potentially induce from weaker, and I think that's something that we should be looking to incorporate into our game. So for this video, it's very much more of the same. We're going to be playing the same stakes, two tables, and just continuing to explore what the games are like here at Betfair and what we can be doing to try and maximize our profits here. So as before, on the right-hand table, if we're dealt junky hands, we're just going to be folding. We're not going to be overplaying our big blind. Position is very important. So if we don't have it and we're either having a weak holding or not getting a particularly good price, then we're not going to be taking part in the hand. So, folding, although folding is always going to lose us one big blind, but, in that spot and theoretically 100 big blinds per 100, sometimes that's a better option than playing it and losing a greater amount long term with a hand that's either just too weak to compete or has some reverse implied odds. Weak jack on the left hand table, much the same, no reason to play, and a weak rainbow hand. Again, just folding, just waiting for decent value spots or particularly profitable spots where we have range advantage and can potentially bluff our opponents. So hopefully some of those are forthcoming. We're going to be widening our range on button, etc., as we have been before, so we'll see if this gets folded round on the right-hand table. Limping is strange and frankly happens at this limit far too much. Something that we are most definitely not going to be taking part in. But versus the limp, this hand is just not going to be sufficiently strong to try and ISO raise. On the left-hand table, it's kind of an interesting spot. Again, limping. I think if it were limp round, we'd be playing and treating the hand as a pulling hand with our nut flush draw. But when we are facing an ISO raise and we're not closing action, we are going to be folding. Calling there is probably not a horrendous play, but I think it is the second best play compared to folding. Very interesting that Gab Judo has decided to limp fold from UTG. That is all sorts of horrendous and certainly worth noting when people are making those kind of plays. Interesting connectivity on the right-hand table. We are actually going to be ISO raising this one. We want to get this heads up if preferable, and certainly when we have position over the limper, that's fantastic. Our hand plays significantly better as a heads-up spot than multi-way. Getting an overcall from the small blind, who is very short stacked, is bizarre, frankly, with his stack size. I would be expecting him to either just get the money in or fold. He chooses a third way, which is fairly bizarre. Aces are always nice on the left-hand table. I'm flopping two pair on a reasonably rainbowy board. Now we're going to be three-betting aces here. And this is a pathetic bet. And we're going to be just going for value with our two pair here. There's not many turns I want to see. So if I can just end the hand here, I'm quite happy. There's going to be some 8-7 draws, 10-8-7, that kind of stuff. But when he bets this small, he's either repping a weak draw or a weak two pair. It's a bizarre sizing. Not really sure what he's hoping to achieve. We just bet pick up, which is fine. Gonna check the aces back. It's going to be one of the stronger hands I would check. I'll be folding the king as UTG. And we're going to be playing the aces as a call on turn. We pick up the gut shot. We have an NFD blocker. Our opponent can for sure have a queen, but he's also going to be bluffing quite a wide range in the spot. Interesting river. I guess if he has a queen, he's probably getting paid. This is now a really weird spot. I certainly can go for value. Try and get paid from a hand such as kings, potentially jacks. But that's kind of it. So we're really going to size down. Um, if we get check raised, it's almost certainly quads, which are getting obscenely greedy. But he ends up folding. So we got one street off a bluff, which is absolutely fine. Min raise from the short stack. I would have thought, again, he should be trying to play for stacks as readily as he can with the stronger parts of his holdings. But our weak jack was not going to be sufficient to play. Certainly not versus 3-bet, but not in general either. Apologies for the Discord going off. I will be muting that. Aces on the left-hand table. See what action we get in front of us as to what we are going to do. Likely going to be 3-betting in most instances, but if it's a spot where hypothetically there's 3 limps in front, then all of a sudden it's less profitable for us to go for the raise. Average queen, I guess we call, and try and take a flop. It's an okay flop. I'm going to be checking in there. Certainly falls into part of my check calling range. And 3-betting on a spot where I have position and have a particularly strong hand is definitely going to be profitable. I think I'm going to be checking my 10 again. There are some flushes to check back, but they're very much on the weaker side. But we're just going to pot control and potentially induce from weaker. We get 4-bet. It's quite likely my opponent can have aces here. If he is, we're just getting the money in. And I guess we check the 10 again. Ace 10 and 7-6. Not really sure what he's doing there. And unfortunately he gets there with a hand that really had no right to be in. But never mind. It's a perfectly good hand to call a 3-bet with, but it literally has no value in 4-betting, and my 4-bet range is going to be very, very ace heavy, which his hand is doing very poorly versus. So a fairly bad stack off by him there, but he managed to flop quite a considerable amount of equity on flop. And yeah, it's the nature of pot limit Omaha. Sometimes our opponents can make bad decisions and get rewarded for them. I'm going to be folding out of position. Sit down a little less than a buy-in given we're up on the other table. But the decisions we made have been fairly good. Cappuccino is limping again. This again is a pulling hand that I want to try and keep stack to pot as high as possible and realize my equity in the form of straights and flushes, which are going to need 4, probably 5 cards to connect with. It's a hand that's going to want to see flop turn river. And as such, we are just going to be calling. ISO raising has some value as well. And actually in position, I'm kind of leaning towards the ISO raise. So I think that is actually what I'm going to do here. I'm going to be folding the Ace King 7-3 given the under the gun open. It's a hand I would be opening myself if the open had not happened. And given Gav's been folding to some of these raises, I'm okay with ISOing. Flopping okay. So I've had an overpair, something along the lines of kings, queens, aces. There's certainly an argument for checking. I think my 6 is sufficiently weak, I don't do that. I do have redraws with 4-5, backdoor clubs, so I'm just going to be betting. Don't really need to go much more than half pot and just evaluate. His range is going to be weighted towards draws, so I'm going to give it one more shot and just give up if he calls turn here. But he's going to have a lot of 10-8-9s. So we just have range advantage on that turn. We have far more strong 4 houses there. So if I'm going to be betting flop, then betting that turn is going to be a pretty profitable spot and almost certainly obligatory to just fire. Again, I don't really need to size up. It doesn't accomplish much. If we're getting folds for less than half pot, then going 3/4 of pot is just risking more money for negligible returns. 10-8, King 10 8-7. It's perfectly fine in later positions, but UTG plus 1 seems a little light on the right-hand table. Well, connected queens, but rainbow queens. If Domo wants to raise, then we would theoretically be playing for stacks versus him. Given Domo's been limping quite a bit or min raising and has not re-raised, I think I do call here and just play flops. It is going to connect with a decent amount of high cards. There is a slight worry that my opponent, who's 3-bet, can potentially have some of my range dominated, but it's a spot we're going to take a flop and play accordingly. We're going to go for a check on flop. Not one that connects particularly well with me, but also doesn't connect all that well with the 3-better. Curious half pot. I think with the stack size, it's very strange for him to be leading, frankly. Certainly he's going to be fairly draw dominant, but I think with just queens, it's just going to be a fold. But a bizarre lead. And just folding the weak king. Snap check back on the right-hand table. In a spot where, frankly, the board should favour the buttons with range more than the callers. So very interesting he's checked that one back. Pretty little hand on the button. And one I will for sure be opening. Reasonable flop. I don't think we gain much by betting, though. I'm going to check that once. Queen pairing is not fantastic, although my opponent checks again. I think I'm going to check here and allow him to bluff rivers. And we're just going to take a flop with the reasonable king. It's really a question of whether I can ever expect to get value on this. With the 8-9 draw and pair, we're just going to be checking here. I actually don't think there's much value in betting here, so we'll just check through. I'm very likely to have the best hand, but I just don't see us getting much value, really. He has to be calling a lot of random ace-x's, which I mean, could potentially call, but it doesn't seem too likely. They're likely to have bet earlier in the hand. And I'm just going to be checking my 8-9 draw here with the 10. It's a limp spot. Certainly somebody could have checked a bear jack back. And I'd rather realise the equity of the straight and then make a decision rather than bet middle pair in a spot where I'm not all that sure where I am. Flush comes in. Again, we're just going to be taking showdown. Not expecting to be good that often. It can happen. Cool, chop it up. Seems reasonable. Deuces. Absolutely appalling hand. So 1.5 sessions in to the Omaha games here at Betfair, I can probably say that we have a vague feel for how people are playing. It seems to be more multi-way pots than I was expecting. They seem to be overplaying ranges in 3-bet, 4-bet spots quite considerably. And it just seems to be a very, very sort of loose passive game where long term, a decent, tight, aggressive style is going to be profitable. So yeah, it seems like a game that at this limit, if you have a reasonable knowledge of pot limit Omaha, that you're going to be able to make a good amount of money. All in on the left-hand table. continued limping, which I guess is another point I should add to the overall impressions that I've seen so far. Far more limping than I was expecting. This hand, though, is not going to be contesting the pot. I'm quite happy to keep my reasonably tight but aggressive image intact, and use it to kind of exploit spots like the 7-6, 7-7 board previously. And this is what I mean by multi-way spots. If you are playing stakes such as PLO 50, PLO 100, the number of times you're going to see four-handed pots is going to be very, very infrequent. And yet we see someone repeatedly limping under the gun, which is going to incentivize more people into the pot, which is going to increase the number of people in the pot, increase the number of multi-way spots. And that's just not something you're going to see particularly often at higher limits, but it's something that we're seeing here, so we're having to make adjustments versus it. There are no adjustments we should ever make with 3-9, so that's a pretty easy fold. The left-hand table, my opponent in the big blind is eating into the camera time. And limping on the right-hand table. Limping symmetry. It's a hand on the right-hand table that I'm going to be opening button with, as is, versus UTG opens. We are going to be folding it. So there is a little kind of bonus symbol here telling me when my next release is going to be. They do have a welcome bonus here at Betfair. It's up to 200%. I believe up to €1,000. By all means, double check that and have a look at PokerVIP for the exact details. But a 200% welcome bonus is very welcome. Excuse the pun. So yeah, just a nice little sort of boost to the bankroll if you decide to deposit here and see what happens. Reasonably good pulling hand with my ace-9-7-5. Limping has some value. I think, however, I'm going to be ISOing. I don't expect to get back raised that often, and perhaps building the pot is reasonable. I put myself in awkward spots if I happen to get raised behind. Ace-Jack-8 deuce against a half stack is not going to have the stacked pot in my favor. Flopping a 5. Checking has its merits. Turning twosies. If we bet into, it's a very easy call. If it's checked to us, we can start building the pot with what is likely the best hand. It's unlikely our opponent is going to be checking better. And if he is, he's likely check raising, in which case we can make a reasonably disciplined fold on this turn. But for the moment, let's bet with the assumption we have the best hand and go for value. 9's UTG plus 1, I'm not going to be strong enough. Improving to ace-7, and I just don't see this bet ever being a bluff here. He's repping a hand like 6-3, 6-8 straights, which theoretically he can have in his range here. But I just really don't see this ever being a bluff, especially for that sizing. If he sizes down, it actually makes the spot reasonably awkward for me as to whether I should be calling with my 2-pair. But when he pots it, a pot bet in that spot is just going to be so nutted, so value heavy, that unless my opponent's an absolute genius and more balanced than I would expect anyone at this limit to be, we can just make the reasonably easy fold with 2-pair, and he can miss out on the value that he possibly could have extracted on the river. But yeah, just sizing that size, it's not going to get enough calls. If he sizes something around half to 2/3, it puts me in a very awkward spot because I'm getting a moderately good price, and he can include some bluffs in there, some busted flushes. potentially hands like the 6-7 draw that hasn't made the straight and just made the pair on the river. But when he pots it, it's just going to weight it so heavily towards the nuts that we just don't need to call it. Pretty much as simple as that. King Queen Rag on the right hand table. This hand is going to have to go multi-way to quite a degree to incentivize me to call out the big blind. Once the 3-bet goes in, we are for sure folding what is a very weak disjointed hand. And folding the weak Rainbow Queen on the left-hand table. So far in this session, we have got it in good once in a 5-bet spot, technically. And other than that, we've just been showing good discipline by not paying off in spots where our opponent's range is nutted. And sometimes that's going to be what happens in these games, that you just boost your win rate by not paying off, by having a good river court efficiency, and by making folds when your opponent's range is crushing yours. Not paying off in spots that your opponents would pay off in, is money that you're not losing. I mean, that's going to add to a better win rate long term. So, as unglamorous as it may be to make the discipline folds versus stacking your opponent, it is a very key component to boosting your win rate. So, probably good that we get to show this off in a session. Although I wouldn't complain to see a couple of spots where we can just bink the nuts and get paid. It's going to be fun. Sixes on the button. It's a raise if it falls around. The right-hand table does seem to be a bit more aggro, just given the fact there are less limps on it. So whether it gets folded around is a bit of a moot point at this point. Also, there's some shorter stacks and they're playing a bit more aggressively, which with a short stack is the correct strategy to go for. As is, it does get folded around, so I guess we raise. The only disaster is if Domo decides to come over the top, but I mean, I guess for 20 bigs, I just have to gamble with a double suited hand. Gonna check back the pair and flush draw. It's not a great flush draw. That's the turn. That is the turn. Players just call and I guess call all rivers. I mean, he can sometimes have ace-9, he can sometimes make a better full house, but given his stack size, if that happens, he just gets paid. Ace-10, I guess, is one of the hands that can beat his range, but he can also jam 8-7. I really expect his full houses to have actually gone for pot here. So I guess we go for the greedy raise and try and get paid by his king, maybe. This is a really weird spot. Alright, I guess we just go for value and try and get paid. Nice. And we get paid by trips. Yeah, the ace-queen. That's fine. It's what we were angling for. And betting flop isn't really going to accomplish much. We're never getting an ace to fold, especially with that stack size, but we're only really getting hands like pair of tens, pair of jacks to fold, and we have redraws versus that with a flush draw anyway, so it's not really going to accomplish much betting on that spot. I'm going to be folding the queen jack 9-4. If the 4 was less of a dangler and more coordinated, I would be more interested in the hand. And folding the weak connected hand under the gun. So Arkusan has run up a couple of stacks on both tables. And he's kind of illustrating that these stakes can be quite gambly, and that gambling players can run it up. But these are the kind of players you actually want to be playing, because typically a gambly player is going to be making fairly fundamental mistakes long term. And sure, short term he might, run particularly well and run up a couple of stacks on you, but long term those fundamental mistakes will come back and haunt him, and will lead to him losing quite a bit of money. You know, to a reasonably tight, aggressive, solid style. So these are the kind of players you actually want to play against. I much prefer on the right-hand table to have position on him, but you can't have everything in life. When I sat down, I also wasn't aware of what kind of player he was like. I'm going to be opening the double-suited connected hand with a dangler. Flopping 3-pair. Just going to start out with a bet. Or a number of draws my opponent can have. That's the nut boat. We're going to size down to try and keep our opponent's ace queen tens, flush draws, I suppose queen 10 nines as well if he's going for the lower straight combos. I'm just going to size down. Also, our opponent can pick up trip kings. We're quite happy for that to continue. But unfortunately don't get paid. But potting there is just going to make our hand look so nutted that sizing down is pretty much the only way we're going to get 3 streets. And checking is going to allow our opponent occasionally to make flushes, make straights, and potentially pay us off, but we're trying to maximize our profits versus somebody and maximize the damage a mistake can make. And players at this limit are going to chase on paired boards, and we want to make those decisions as damaging as possible for them. And betting turn is going to accomplish that. So while occasionally they're going to be able to make the correct fold, it's also going to build the pot and make any potential river decisions he has, if he rivers the flush or the straight, that much more difficult and also that much more financially damaging for him. And that's something we really want to encourage as much as possible. We're going to be opening kings. Having the ace blocker is fairly good news as well. It reduces the number of ace combos that our opponents can have and potentially 3-bet at us. Flopping top set against a reasonably short size stack. It's going to size slightly over half pot, encourage combo draws to jam on me, encourage 2 pairs to play back at me. Not a great turn. And we get bet out for half pot. Just going to call here. And our opponent sizes down again. There's no value on raising here. He's only ever going to be calling with straights. I think if he had a straight, he'd be trying to stack us here. So we are going to make the call with top set and get paid versus a 2-pair. I assume value betting, but it's a god-awful value bet. So just calling turn is allowing our opponent to make a great mistake on river. And also pot control in the eventuality that our opponent does have the straights that have us crushed. We're folding queens when straights come in. Jack 9-8. Our opponent's reasonably short stacked. Back of clubs is concerning, but I guess we'll peel and stack off if we connect. That is not connecting. I will be folding here, especially versus a pot size bet. I really can't think of a single hand you'd want to pot here. It is either completely nutted or it's bluffing too large of a size and increasing your risk. Either way, we're just going to be folding Jack High. But it's something that we really want to be looking at when we're playing stakes such as these, on how our bet sizings are going to be interpreted and influence our opponent's actions. Just going to be calling here. If I had the ace of diamond here, I'd be more incentivized to 3-bet. As is, we're just going to take a flop and see what happens. Flop in a gut shot and a backdoor flush draw. I suppose a backdoor Broadway draw, but it's far from a favorite flop of mine. And again, our opponent's potting in a spot where it really doesn't make much sense to pot. So, sure. You want hands like mine to actually be incentivized to continue to float and pot betting there is just not going to achieve that. So we're going to set out the next hand as we fold our double suited nines on button. So this session has not been as profitable as the previous one, but I think the decisions we made were pretty good. Obviously, losing the big all-in was reasonably damaging to our profit line here, but building it up on the right-hand table. So as before, any questions, comments, feedback, leave it below, and I will endeavour to see it and respond to it as quickly as I possibly can. And with that being said, I've been Tom for PokerVIP, and I hope you come back for part 3.